some mysteries, they just stick with you, you know?
Yeah.
And the Dyatlov Pass incident, that's definitely one of them. We're diving into the story of 9 experienced hikers, a remote mountain pass in the Urals, and a discovery that's fueled speculation for decades.
It's a case that really gets under your skin.
No kidding. And you clearly feel the same way, judging by this file you sent over. It's packed with details about this case.
Yeah.
Ready to unpack this one together.
Absolutely. It's a story that just grabs you and pulls you in, blends this raw power of nature with, like, the human need to understand the unknown.
Exactly. We've got documented facts, we've got analysis, and yet there's still this lingering sense of, I don't know, is it just me, or is there something unsettling about this whole thing?
Oh, definitely unsettling. There's something about the setting, the circumstances that just gets to you.
Okay, so for our listeners who might be new to this, let's set the scene. January 1959, the dead of winter in the Ural Mountains. This group, led by Igor Dyatlov, they weren't exactly, out for a casual weekend hike, were they?
No, not at all. These were seasoned hikers, the real deal. They knew that terrain and were prepared for the harsh conditions of the Urals in winter. They were on their way to a Torton mountain, and even back then, that was known to be pretty unforgiving.
And that's what makes this whole thing so perplexing. We're talking experienced adventurers, equipped for the worst. So walk us through it. What were those early discoveries, the ones that really set alarm bells ringing?
Well, the first thing that raised a red flag was a delayed telegram. The group was supposed to check in, standard procedure, but that message never arrived.
Okay, so at this point, the alarm bells are definitely starting to sound. What happens next?
Well, as you can imagine, concern grows with each passing day. Eventually, search parties are sent out to try and locate the missing hikers.
And then comes that chilling discovery on the slopes of Kholat-Syakhl, Dead Mountain. I mean, even the name itself sends a shiver down your spine, right? What did those search parties find?
So on February 26th, they found the group's tent, abandoned, partially collapsed, just lying there on the mountainside.
Okay, so far, tragic, but not necessarily unusual, right? I mean, accidents happen, especially in those conditions. So what was it about the tent that made this different?
It's the details that get you, like the fact that the tent had been cut open from the inside.
Hold on, cut open from the inside.
Yeah.
As if they were trapped.
That's what's so strange about it. It's like they clawed their way out in a desperate hurry, as if something inside that tent terrified them more than whatever was outside in that frozen wasteland.
Okay, now that's just creepy. You're in that position, feeling like you have to escape your own shelter in the middle of winter. Why? What could drive them to do that?
Well, that's the million-dollar question, and it gets even more confusing when you consider what they left behind. Supplies, most of their warm clothing, even some footwear.
So it's not just that they left the tent, it's that they left essential gear behind. That doesn't make any sense. It's as though they fled without a second thought about the freezing conditions outside.
Precisely, and that's what has fueled so much of the speculation around this case. It just doesn't add up.
Okay, so we've got a group of experienced hikers making a seemingly irrational decision to abandon their shelter in the dead of winter. Did any of them manage to make it out of that tent alive?
Sadly, no. The bodies were found scattered across the mountainside, some closer to the tent, others much, much farther away.
Scattered. Does that tell us anything about how they might have died?
Well, 2 of the hikers were found near the remnants of a makeshift fire. Incredibly, they were barefoot, and get this, barely clothed.
Barefoot in the snow. It's like something out of a nightmare. It just doesn't add up. And that's not even the strangest part, is it? The injuries are where things go from unsettling to downright baffling.
You're right, that's where the mystery really deepens. The autopsies painted a very confusing picture.
How so? What did the autopsies reveal?
Well, some of the deaths were consistent with hypothermia, which, given the conditions, is tragic, but, understandable. But there were others that showed signs of severe internal trauma.
Internal trauma? What are we talking about here?
Injuries similar to what you might see in a car crash, but here's the catch. There were no external wounds to explain them.
Wait, hold on. Internal injuries? Like a car crash, but no external wounds. That sounds less like an accident and more like, I don't know, something out of a sci-fi thriller. This is where my imagination starts to run wild. What kind of internal trauma are we talking about specifically?
Broken ribs. One of them had a fractured skull. And maybe the most disturbing detail of all, one of the hikers was missing her tongue.
Okay, hold on. This is a lot to process. We've got experienced hikers fleeing their tent in a panic, some found barefoot and barely clothed in the snow, and then there are these unexplainable injuries. This is heavy stuff. Before we jump into the various theories, and you send over a bunch of them, What stands out to you as the most unusual or perplexing aspect of these initial discoveries?
It's those contradictions, isn't it? The things that just don't quite add up. Like you said, these were experienced hikers. They knew the risks, came prepared for the harsh conditions, and yet they abandoned their shelter, seemingly in a panic, leaving behind essential gear. And then there are the injuries. Some explainable by the elements, others not so much. It's a puzzle where the pieces just don't quite fit.
It's like they were running from something terrifying, something we can't even begin to understand. And that takes us to the theories, right? Because where there's a mystery this baffling, there are bound to be theories. And you haven't held back, have you? The files you sent over cover everything from the totally plausible to, well, let's just say, out there. So where do we even begin to unravel this?
Well, a good place to start is with what many consider the most likely explanation, the avalanche theory.
Okay, the avalanche theory. Makes sense at first glance, right? You're out in these remote mountains, the raw power of nature. You'd instinctively run for your life, wouldn't you? But I'm guessing it's not that simple.
You're right to be skeptical. While an avalanche could explain the initial panic and the decision to flee the tent, the classic version of this theory has a few holes.
Like what?
Well, for starters, there wasn't that much snowfall recorded in the area at the time. And the terrain where they camped, it wasn't exactly a prime location for a massive avalanche.
So, not impossible, but less likely. And what about the injuries? Could an avalanche really cause that kind of internal damage while leaving no external signs? It doesn't seem likely, does it?
That's the sticking point. It's one of the reasons why some researchers have moved away from the traditional avalanche explanation. However, there's been some recent research that offers a fascinating twist on this theory. What if it wasn't a typical avalanche, but a smaller, delayed one?
A delayed avalanche?
Yeah.
Okay, now you've got my attention. I've never even heard of that.
Imagine this. A slab of snow breaks off high up the slope. It doesn't hit the tent directly, at least not at first. But it's close enough to cause damage, to create that sense of panic, the need to escape immediately. That delay, the time it takes for the snow to actually reach the tent. That could explain why they cut their way out instead of using the entrance. Almost as if they thought they were trapped.
So they panicked, misjudged the situation, made a fatal error in those crucial seconds. It's incredibly tragic when you think about it. But does this theory explain those injuries? Because that's the part that's always been the hardest to wrap my head around.
Well, this is where it gets really interesting. This new research on delayed avalanches, it's actually being supported by some pretty high-tech simulations.
Simulations, like computer models.
Exactly. And they're using technology borrowed from, believe it or not, animation.
Animation? Hold on, are we talking Disney's Frozen here?
You got it. You see, those groundbreaking snow simulations, the ones that made the snow in that movie look so realistic, turns out they have real-world applications too.
Wow, I never would have made that connection. So they're using technology from Frozen to try to understand what happened on Dead Mountain.
Essentially, yes. They recreated the avalanche scenario, inputting all the known variables, the terrain, the snow conditions, even the placement of the tent. They wanted to see if this kind of delayed avalanche could have generated the force needed to cause those injuries.
What were the results?
Pretty compelling. The simulations showed that this type of avalanche, while not leaving behind the kind of dramatic, Hollywood-style evidence you'd expect, could have created those same internal injuries, the broken bones, the trauma, without leaving the kind of external marks you typically associate with that level of force.
Okay, so we're back to the avalanche, but with a 21st century Frozen-inspired twist. It's a theory that, at least partially, seems to fit the evidence we have. What about those other theories, though? I mean, you mentioned infrasound, even military testing. What's the story there?
So this delayed avalanche theory, with a little help from, of all things, Disney animation, that's pretty compelling stuff. But what about those other theories we touched on earlier, like infrasound? That was one that really piqued my curiosity. Could those weird low-frequency sounds have played a role in this whole thing?
It's definitely a possibility worth considering. Remember, infrasound, those are the sound waves that are so low we can't actually hear them.
Right, like dog whistles, we can't hear them, but dogs can.
Exactly, and just like with dog whistles, just because we can't consciously hear infrasound doesn't mean it can't affect us. Some studies have shown that exposure to certain frequencies of infrasound can trigger feelings of unease, anxiety, even panic.
So you're telling me these sound waves we can't even hear could potentially mess with our minds? In a way, yes. And think about it. You're in this remote mountain pass. You've just experienced what you believe to be a life-threatening avalanche. And on top of that, your body starts feeling these strange, unexplained sensations, anxiety sets, and maybe even hallucinations. It's not hard to imagine how that could lead to irrational, even dangerous behavior.
That's like a recipe for disaster. A perfect storm of natural phenomena and human psychology colliding with tragic consequences.
Precisely, and when you factor in the unique geography and weather patterns of the Ural Mountains, it's not outside the realm of possibility that infrasound could have played a part in this tragedy.
So we got this delayed avalanche potentially amplified by the effects of infrasound, creating this cascade of fear and confusion that ultimately led to those hikers' deaths. It's a chilling thought, but it seems to fit the strange circumstances of this case better than most other explanations out there.
It's definitely a theory that holds water, and it's one that researchers are still exploring today.
It's like something straight out of a sci-fi horror film, except this is real life we're talking about.
Yeah.
It's both fascinating and terrifying at the same time.
Absolutely. It really makes you think twice about the power of the natural world and the things we still don't fully understand.
Okay, before we wrap things up, we have to address the elephant in the room, or maybe I should say the conspiracy theory in the room. We talked about military testing and the fact that the Urals were home to military installations. Is there any actual evidence to suggest that something more, clandestine might have happened?
It's a question that has lingered for decades. And understandably so, the presence of military activity in the region has fueled all sorts of speculation. But to be completely honest, there's no concrete evidence to link the Dyatlov Pass incident to any specific military operation or testing.
So those orange orbs in the sky that some witnesses reported seeing, could they have been something military in nature?
It's possible, but those could have been anything from meteor fireballs to signal flares without more concrete data. It's impossible to say for sure. And to be fair to the researchers who have dedicated their lives to unraveling this mystery, they've been very thorough in their investigation of all possibilities, including any potential military involvement.
So we're left with a lot of what-ifs and maybes, which I suppose is part of what makes this case so endlessly fascinating. We may never know for sure what happened on that mountainside, but the search for answers, the exploration of possibilities, that's what keeps us coming back for more, isn't it?
Absolutely, and I think the Dyatlov Pass incident serves as a powerful reminder that despite all our advancements in science and technology, there are still things in this world that defy easy explanation.
It's a humbling thought and maybe a little bit exciting too. It reminds us that there are still mysteries out there waiting to be solved. Or maybe not. Maybe some mysteries are meant to stay with us, to challenge our understanding of the world and to keep us asking questions.
The unknown has a way of captivating the human imagination, and the Dyatlov Pass incident is a prime example of that.
So to our listeners, we leave you with this. What do you think happened on that fateful night in 1959? Do you side with the delayed avalanche theory, perhaps amplified by the strange effects of infrasound? Or do you believe there's something more to the story, something we may never fully comprehend, whatever your conclusion have made? The Dyatlov Pass incident remains a testament to the enduring power of mystery and the importance of never stopping asking questions.
Well said. The pursuit of knowledge, the drive to understand, that's what makes us human. And the Dyatlov Pass incident, with all its twists and turns, will continue to fascinate and intrigue us for generations to come.